Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Brittany, for being here with us today. And thanks for everybody who is coming here to learn a little bit more about the Greater Cleveland Food Bank. We are so excited to have everyone here in the audience. The food bank is a big organization. We've got 160 or so employees. We serve, last year, 350,000 people, 1,000 program partners. It's a big organization with a lot of moving pieces. And so today I'm so excited to talk with Brittany about the literal moving pieces of what we do. I'm really trying to work in all the transportation puns that I can. Because you are a transportation manager. And when we talk about all of our different programs and all of our partners, obviously, there is the literal getting of A to B. So it is really great to really dive into, all of what your team does that really helps make our programs happen with getting our food out into the communities. So welcome. Thank you for joining us, Brittany. Would you like to introduce yourself a little bit, share about how you got to the food bank, your journey here?
Yeah, thanks for having me. I've been here at the food bank for about 2 years in May coming up. And before that, I was working at Giant Eagle's warehouse as a supervisor there in the fleet department. So I've had a lot of fleet experience. And then before that, I graduated from Ohio State with a logistics degree.
Well, I know that we've got some big Ohio State fans here, yeah. So
I'm Michigan fans too, but
which we don't talk to them, right?
One might be the boss, but
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
Oh, well, he's never invited to these. Awesome. Well, we're so much on our operational and our warehouse side. We do have amazing relationships with kind of for-profit partners, but we also love to coach amazing people who've worked on that side to help us build how we do things here, because the expertise of that for-profit side is really helpful. But as we'll get into, all of the little different ways that we have to do things as a nonprofit makes your life a lot of fun puzzle pieces to put together. And I did want to add, we were hoping to have one of our drivers join us today, but just, as scheduling happens, as I'm sure folks out there know, didn't work out, but hopefully in the future, we'll have some people who, do some of the on the ground work join us at some future Food for Thoughts or other events. So, stay tuned for what we're able to put together in the future. All right, Brittany, well, let's start with kind of an overview of the transportation department. So I know that, we have, 20 trucks, and we just went from 19 truck drivers to 20 truck drivers. We just want to talk a little bit just about, let's get down to the basics with, who you have on your team and what they do.
So starting Monday, this past Monday, we now have 20 drivers. So they range in age. A couple of them have been here for 25 years plus. So that's exciting to have people here for that long and their experience. So they remember going to all the different buildings that the food bank has had. So this was like their third building that they've been in over the years. Plus they've known a lot more of the agencies and their experience with trucks and different things that happen. So they're very knowledgeable when it comes to that. Out of them, they all have a class B, and then we have 6 class A drivers. 2 of them, we have 2 female drivers. 1 is a class A as well. So definitely a different variety of age and all the different groups. So these guys, they come in every morning, whether it's rain, shine, the snow, the cold, they do it all.
Well, I know, I'm sure as folks have heard, not just on like supply chain issues, but, transportation has been, has really taken some difficult, has had some difficult things over the last couple of years. And it's pretty amazing like how our team has come together to make sure that no matter what, we are getting food out to our partners and our neighbors. That's pretty awesome that our team is that strong.
Oh, yes. So especially if some people were out or covering on PTO, a lot of drivers help cover the other drivers' routes, or they'll help try to cover a couple extra stops to kind of help, especially if we know someone needs to be off and unfortunately we just have that much work. They do try to help work with each other to make sure that we can still deliver where we need to deliver and yet still let our drivers have the day off.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and that's so important is, taking care of, each other while we take care of our community. So, it's great to hear that. And, and it keeps things running. We want everybody to, be able to take care of their families and themselves. And, then everyone shows up to work, I think, able to really give when they, their kind of normal lives and their health and all of that are good. So,
right. And I mean, sometimes things don't always go as planned on the deliveries, and you might need an extra pair of hands. So even this morning, having to get a hold of another driver that was in the area, they went and helped another driver with the equipment, just so that way they can continue and they can still deliver and keep going on about their day. So they're very good with working with each other if anything comes up.
Yeah, and it's not easy as we'll get into actually figuring out all of the different routes and how the deliveries and pickups work is a lot. So I'm sure being able in real time to help people out, and I'm sure like people are calling and texting and not texting on the road, but getting in touch constantly to make it work. It's a lot. 20 drivers, 20 trucks is a lot.
Right. And they all try to help each other with directions, or if there's certain delivery instructions or maybe a better contact, they're really good with helping each other on that.
Yeah. Well, so that's a perfect, segue kind of into what our transportation department does, how the programs work. So I know, we've got, programs they work with, our agencies are, a huge program, our kids programs and our seniors programs. And I know those all work a little bit differently. So let's, start with kind of how our agency orders work, because obviously that's, a huge component. Our agencies are what you're going to think of as your typical food pantry. So it's going to be your, like a distribution site for kind of your shelf stable, fresh fruits and veggies, frozen like meats and other products like that. So if you want to walk through how our agencies work, and then we'll move on to kind of our kids and senior programs too.
Okay, the agencies, there's kind of a couple different ones. A few of them just have, again, their pantry orders. So sometimes it'll be the dry, cooler, frozen, that type of delivery. But then there's also mobile pantry deliveries. So that's another pantry. Usually that's when they do their distributions that day. So we'll have to deliver in the morning and then they'll end up handing that food out. A lot of them don't have the room for it. So a lot of times when we're delivering, those will happen right there, wherever we're delivering. So yeah, the agencies, they have anywhere from a couple pallets, or a pallet or two, and then to a full truck. So there's some really large agencies and then there's some smaller agencies. So they're kind of all over the board. So it just depends on who's ordering that day and what we have to do to deliver them. Most of them, if it's a full truck, again, that'll be the only place that they're delivering on that leg, and then they'll come back and reload their truck and then go back out. Some of them, if they're only a pallet, usually they're mixed in with some of the kids' deliveries or even our senior deliveries. So with the senior meals, they usually, we have our Western reserves that we do in the morning, and that has all their hot meals that they do. And then there's CSFP, which they get the CSFP boxes and their cheese. So that could be that delivery as well. And then the kids, they have the backpacks or they have the hot or cold meals. And that gets intermixed with our deliveries as well.
Yeah, I mean, so it's a lot. So, I didn't really quite understand like what like a pallet was before I started. And I've worked on, volunteering with our agencies when they've gotten deliveries. And I mean, the pallet, if you wanted to kind of describe like how it like physically is a little bit, because I had a hard time wrapping my head around kind of what what it all means.
Yeah, I forget the actual dimension of the like the pallet that they build on. But usually we end up using a jack to put it on or a rider onto the truck, but they'll start stacking whatever pantry items. So a lot of times they'll put the heavier, say your cans or bigger boxes that'll go on the bottom, and then they'll build their way up. So some of them could be about the height of your knee, and then some of them are about the size, like the top of your head. We just have to make sure that they would fit on the truck. So they're kind of built a little bit differently. But the warehouse will go around and select those items that are on the pantry order. And again, starting with the heavier items, they'll put on the bottom of the pallet and then work their way up to build about a pallet as tall as us, just so that way we can get more on the truck.
Yeah, well, and then your drivers come and load stuff with, I know they get like a order list to check everything off, especially once they start getting orders for different partners or different types of meals. I mean, y'all are very organized in terms of not just like your routes, but also making sure that the right order is on the right truck too.
Yes. So we work a lot with the warehouse and making sure invoices are matching and the product is the correct product that is going to the agency. So we do work with them. If something doesn't match or if something's missing, we usually go with them and to ask just to make sure we have the right pallet and we're not missing anything. So it's a little bit easier to see if you have 10 boxes compared to just 2 bags sitting on a pallet, something's missing.
Yeah, but it's a lot. And I mean your team drove almost 300,000 miles, and that's made up of just hundreds of individual deliveries and pickups every single week. So it's a lot. And I think all the balances and checks that we have to make sure that we're doing things right by our partners is like, it's a lot, but it's so important. And I'm always just impressed by how our operations like works. It's mind-boggling when you think about the complexity of it. So I know you were also talking about the different orders. So I know that our orders come in like 3 days in advance of when they need their deliveries done. And then when we get that, we also then check everything. I know, like for Saturday, we also deliver on Saturdays too. So those are
there are mobile pantries that deliver on Saturdays. So that is typically like overtime for the drivers. So they sign up and help pull their weight and help deliver on Saturdays as well. So usually we'll load up on Friday afternoon when they're done with all their deliveries. That way they're ready to go in the morning, and then they're there usually between like 7:30 and 9:30 is like the time frame that they do, because a lot of them start by 10 o'clock with handing out.
Yeah, well, and I mean it is important, like we were saying, is helping our team helping each other out is that balance, like helping our neighbors, because folks work. Saturday can be a great time for people to get food, and I think the flexibility your team brings to make that happen is just really amazing. Like helping taking time from their weekend to make sure that other folks who are working are able to get the food that they need is really amazing. And it really it really speaks to how much your team really cares about our mission.
And what makes a difference too is a lot of the places they use other lots that might not always belong to them. So they might be at a church, they might be at a school. So sometimes that makes it a little bit more difficult because they have to wait for school to be out. Or if they're using a different lot, that's what you kind of have to go around as well. So a lot of them, that's why some of them do them on Saturdays, because they can actually have that lot at that time.
Yeah. Well, I know when we were, kind of prepping and talking, before our talk here, you were saying that one of the big differences between, your work before and your work here is that, the volume, like at American Seaway or some of the, kind of big companies is obviously more, but, here with the places that you're dropping off to, especially, is it's a little bit of like the Wild West. Every place is a little different. Like you were talking about different contacts, like the physical layout, all of that is totally different than kind of on like the business side of things where it's a dock and then you move to another dock. I would love just to hear a little bit about kind of the on the ground experience our drivers have.
Yeah, so after the warehouse, they select all the product and build all of the pallets. They'll stage them on the dock, or they'll stage them on the cold dock, or they'll put them into the freezer or the cooler, and then they'll mark it down on the staging sheets of like where they put those pallets. So in the mornings, drivers will come in, they'll look at their paperwork and then find out how many pallets they might have, how many lunches they might need for the day. So they're looking at all their paperwork, and then they'll start starting to load their own trucks. So that's when most of them will be either loading their pallets or they're over on the cold dock getting all of their trays and wheels for the lunches. And then there's also crates of milk. So there's a lot of different pieces that they're putting together, and they're trying to figure out how to fit it all onto the truck. Most of the trucks that we do have, they can hold about 12,000 pounds, which is about 12 pallets. So each pallet is usually about 1,000 pounds. That's what we kind of gauge everything on when we're routing, just to make sure that there's enough room. But we also have a couple smaller kitchen trucks that they are just delivering straight lunches, and then if anything, backpacks, that they don't have any pallets on their truck. So again, once they get all loaded, that's when they'll head to their agencies. And the difference between here and even Giant Eagle is they don't always deliver to docks. Most of it is out in a parking lot or right there on the street. And they have to use their lift gate in order to bring the pallets down and deliver. And then they'll go back up on the lift gate, go to get the other pallet, bring it back to the lift gate, drop it down, and then go deliver as well. So some of them, they're mostly delivering in the lots, which sometimes that is a gamble as well, depending on the weather, because a lot of them are outside. So they are delivering outside. In the winter, we try to make sure that we're telling agencies that they have to shovel and plow their lots, because we can't get the lift gate and the electric jacked out. So that way we can move the pallets. It would get stuck in the snow. So that's why it makes it a little bit harder when we deliver. And I know some agencies, they'll end up canceling based on the weather. If it's too cold, either the too cold or if it's too snowy, the rain, because then they won't get enough people to show up for it. So a lot of times we get last minute cancellations. And then other ones are like at schools that they'll park, and then they have to walk them in inside. So there's a couple different ways that they're delivering.
Yeah. So everyone's a little different.
Yes.
And it's like a process, trying to get like the right thing out and get it out, there's like a lot, like it's not just, like if you see an Amazon truck in your neighborhood, grabbing the picture, take it off. Yeah. I mean, like there's a lot of, double and triple checking, and then also just kind of the mechanics of getting things out. And, having been to some of the outdoor sites, when there isn't great weather, they're not easy to kind of maneuver around. So I can imagine, this time of year, it's not easy at some of these places to actually physically get all the product out.
Right, it's a little bit easier if places have docks. So usually when we do pickups at local stores, they all have docks. So it makes it a little bit easier in loading and unloading pallets, because you don't have to use the lift gate. So that makes a difference. And then also doing all the paperwork for each place that they have to sign off. A lot of them, they'll check their invoice to make sure that they're getting the correct amount of items. And then even lunches, they have to write down and they have to log what times and what temperatures that they have.
Yeah. And I mean, it sounds like it's a lot of paperwork and people are like, oh, like red tape, but it's not really, because, we have, with like school lunches is, we need to make sure all the food is safe and that there's enough food for all of the kids. For the regular programs, we have to, keep track of things to make sure that, we know the right stuff is getting to the right people, but also that also helps us understand, demand and, and then when the agencies are ordering, they know how much they need. So there's a reason behind all of it, but it does, it adds on a lot of time for all of these deliveries, it's, excuse me. So, it's a lot. I know we were talking about, the January kind of figures for what your team was doing. And I know it's hard on these conversations to like spout out numbers, but you were saying in January of this year, we did 542 stops our first week, 739 the second week, 626 the third week, and 762 the fourth week. So that's a lot. And for all of these different stops, there's a different place where we're doing it with different product, picking up, dropping off. I mean, that really is a lot. That is not, none of these are like kind of like standard operating areas. It's really incredible to keep all of that going.
Yeah.
So I think it's cool.
Yeah, some of them they'll have, like if you have more of a pantry delivery, you won't have as many stops as say the kitchen routes, because they're just mostly doing all the lunches and then possibly a couple backpacks. So they might end up having about 17 stops in a day, where people that are doing larger pantry or pickups, they're going to have about 5 or 6 a day. So it kind of just depends on that weight. But then it also, contact information is one of the hardest things, I would say, because a lot of these different places and agencies, they change. Some of them might be volunteers, and then other ones, they're doing a program at a school. So a lot of times there's turnovers, or they'll move from like one location to the other. So just trying to keep up and working with our departments here. And then a lot of times we find out more from the drivers. And so they'll give me the correct information, and then I have to give it over to its programming or someone, just to make sure that we're all on the same page. So sometimes, usually the drivers always know things first, even though we wish they would follow the same proper way, that way we can make sure everyone's on the same page. But a lot of times we do get a lot of information from the drivers. So that's probably one of the hardest, is just when you're there, making sure you have the right contact information and that they're opening up the doors so that way you can start delivering. That way it doesn't delay them to their next stop.
Yeah, well, because, I know part of what again adds to the challenge of what we do is, because our partners, they need to get that food out to their clients, their neighbors, quickly. We have pretty narrow windows when we can actually work with most of our partners, right?
Most of them, they have a 2-hour window that we give them. That way it allows us flexibility when we're doing the routing, depending on what we have that day, of where we can go to first and still be able to hit everybody in their window time. That way we can make sure everyone gets a delivery. Some of our smaller produce, our mobile pantries, they usually go down to an hour. So a lot of times we have between like 8 and 9 or 9 and 10 to try and get them. So depending on which agencies are in that area and how much poundage that they're getting, and to see if it fits all in one truck. So you kind of don't know until you're routing and you see all the pieces and you try to put it all together to see what can fit on a truck, what's in the same area, can we hit it at the same time? So there's a lot of different pieces in doing it.
Yeah. Well, and it's not like, Amazon or the post office where it's like, oh, by 8 p.m. this package will show up at your door. It's
Right.
like, like there is a program happening and that food needs to get there by that time.
Right.
And oh, by the way, that truck has 5 or 6 other stops or 17 other stops. I mean, it's, and with all of the additional work that you have to do at every single site. So that timing and that routing, and dealing with traffic and all of that. I mean, it's a lot. And I feel like I said it's a lot, but it is. And I know you've talked about the routing, and we use like the same kind of routing software that like other companies would use to help with that.
Right. It just makes it a little bit different. Each company is set up a little bit differently. So since we have so many moving parts, one agency, there could be a couple different programs happening at the exact same agency. So they all have different agency numbers and different orders. So one could get a pantry delivery, one could be a Western Reserve. They might have a kids program and something else that we're trying to route at the same time. So currently right now, they'll all come down as individual orders, and then we have to manually put them together just to make sure that they all go to the same location.
Okay, wow. So I mean, it makes sense sort of where you've got, all the orders are going to be A, B, C, but then routing, it still comes in as A, B, C instead of all of them going to the same address or whatever it is.
So right now we're like picking and choosing and making sure that all of them are showing on the same route.
Yeah.
So we're trying to fix a couple things and update it to make it a little bit easier.
Yeah. Well, I think you said that you're working with the company to try and come up with some fixes for that too.
Correct. Yeah, it's a little bit harder when you have multiple pieces going to the same location, but different programs, because they might not be the exact same program and they might not work with each other. So one might be a senior, one might be a different agency or for kids or something. So there's a lot of moving parts, but
yeah, a lot of different moving parts, a lot of different requirements, different contexts probably for all of that too. Yeah, it's like I'm the information
different times.
Yeah.
So trying to see like, okay, can we deliver it a little bit earlier, or if we're kind of in between the different time windows. So that's what we try to go around.
Yeah, it's a lot. And, I know also with the orders and trying to figure it out, we were talking about kind of the pallet size and like 12 pallets in a truck and all of that. But, and we were saying that, not all pallets are also created equal. Is the average is, about 1,000 pounds for most of them, but not always. And so you've got the volume the truck can hold and then the weight that the truck can hold. So
correct.
It's
so yeah, there's a difference of cans on a pallet compared to a pallet full of chips.
Yeah.
So chips are very light and it might be added to an order. And even though it might only be 60 pounds, it could add a whole nother pallet. So sometimes we end up having more pallets than we would, like the 12, if it's a 12,000 pound, it could be about 14 pallets. And then what they end up having to do is try to combine what they can to see if there's 2 pallets that they can combine to one and maybe stack a few things on top of the other. So there's a couple different ways. And then even if it's showing 6,000 pounds, it might only be 4 pallets. So there's a little bit of wiggle room, both ways, which makes it a little bit challenging. So you have to just try to figure out what can you do? Can you make it fit? Or if somebody else can help out, just make sure to take those extra pallets. Or if we can schedule it the next day if we're going to be in the area, depending on what the agency can handle.
Yeah. Well, it sounds, so it's like, at first I thought it was kind of just like, like Jenga, like feeding in the pieces, but it's like Jenga, but also you're packing a suitcase and you're trying to get on the plane underneath the weight that it will let you do. So
because you can think of the best way to describe kind of is when you're in the grocery store and you see those big cardboard bins that usually watermelons are in.
Okay.
So sometimes it could be a pallet full of watermelons or a pallet full of potatoes. That is really, it's only going to be about to your hip, and that's only using like half of the space. So sometimes if we have something lighter, or we can try to stack on top of it, that one's a little bit different compared to a pallet full of 50 something boxes.
Yeah,
so it just kind of depends on what their order is and what you can actually stack. A lot of times potatoes and onions are not the easiest to stack on top of, so that kind of takes up a pallet space, but has a bunch of dead space above it.
Yeah. Well, and I think it is, interesting, walking through all these steps, because, it's really easy to talk about, being efficient and, using as much space as possible. But, to meet the needs of our partners and the food that we need to get out is, you can't have everything perfectly filled up every single time and run down to the minute on things. And I think it's really important to appreciate these details, because there's kind of being effective versus being perfectly efficient. And this is more effective sometimes when you have to have some space in it,
Right. And kind of like how you were saying with Jenga, they have to be a little bit smart of how to load their truck as well. Because if you have a taller pallet and a shorter pallet, a lot of times if the taller pallet isn't wrapped well enough and you hit a bump, or if something happens, it could tip over. So a lot of times they make sure that they wrap their pallets extra in the morning before they actually load them onto the truck. And again, if you have taller pallets, you want to try to put the taller pallets on and balance the weight. So it's a little bit like Jenga, trying to put them onto the pallet, make sure that they're all on the truck and nothing falls over.
Yeah.
There's been a couple times, but luckily most of the agencies are very helpful as well. And they'll help the drivers if something was to fall over, and they try to help pick it up. So that part is nice.
Yeah. I mean, obviously there are folks of every type who work at agencies, who work here, work anywhere, but most of the people who I think we partner with and the volunteers are just awesome, and always, whenever they're able to, lend a hand, always do. And that's just, I think, part of the amazing community that we have here, with everybody in our service area.
And sometimes when we are trying to double stack, we have to make sure that if we put something on top of that, it's something that's easily grabbable. So if they're like smaller boxes, that way they can take them off one by one. A lot of these places, again, they don't have the equipment or ladders to be able to get on top of the pallet to break it down. So we have to be mindful of that as well. If we are combining pallets, we don't want to make it harder for them to try to hand out the food.
Well, and just to plug, a lot of places for volunteerism, a lot of our partners are run largely, if not completely, by volunteers. And a lot of folks who are able to do that are seniors, and so there's kind of a limit to what folks can sometimes physically do. So we want to make it as easy as possible. And I know that was also a big challenge during COVID when we didn't have as many volunteers available too.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I always say, I love to try and, bring in people to our building, our warehouse. And I will say, when you're talking about wrapping the large pallets really tightly, is we've got this really awesome saran wrap machine, basically. And so you put the pallet in it and it zooms around. It's really fun if you get to see it. And because it's nothing that you kind of think of as kind of existing in the world, but it's this fun zoom of a saran wrap around the pallet. And between that and all of our little forklifts that go around, we just have really, I think, cool things that they never let me use, which I think is too bad.
Right. Maybe one day. But the wrap machines, those definitely help. It's more time efficient, and they're tighter wrapped, instead of having to hand wrap everything. That's not always the most ideal. I mean, it's usually you would hand wrap it a little bit until you can get it to the wrapper, and then that way it wraps it up. It makes it more secure.
Yeah, no, and it all makes sense as soon as you hear how all the pieces fit together. It's just, not coming from that world. It really is, exciting to see how all these details and nuances fit together to make this work. And I will say is, if folks do have questions, you can use the Q&A to submit those. We don't have the chat working, but we would love to have any questions that you all have. We'll save some time at the end for those. And if for some reason you ever have a question and you think about it after this is done, you can, email me. I will get you the answers, put you in touch with the right person. So feel free to just send those our way. But now, so we've been talking a lot about the delivery side of what your team does. And, we mentioned a little bit also now about the pickup side of that. So if we want to switch gears a little bit, I probably should stop trying to do those. If you want to talk a little bit about the pickup piece of that, which is when we get, primarily food donations from our kind of food donation partners and retail partners.
Correct. There's a couple different pickups that we do. The most ones are our daily pickups that we have are weekly. So we pick up from like Giant Eagles, we pick up from Trader Joe's, we've got Sam's Club, Walmart's. So each day we have certain pickup locations. So some of them we might just pick up once a week. Other ones might be 2 to 3 times a week, depending on when we're in the area. But we'll go and pick up at those locations and then bring them back. There's also a direct drop program that we use. So we'll go to these donor locations, we'll pick it up, but then we also deliver it straight to an agency along with their order most of the time. That way it's more efficient. So that way the pallets aren't coming back here and then having to get processed and then go back out. So it gets it directly right to the agency. So that way a lot of times they either get more produce that way, or sometimes they get meat from like Giant Eagle. The other ones from Sam's, I know some of them, they just take the bread pallet. So they'll get an extra bread pallet that came from Sam's and they'll get that along with their order. We also pick up at certain warehouses. So we do like the Heinen's warehouse, the refrigerated and the dry. We do American Seaway Foods, which lately we've been using a third-party carrier because they've had so much that it fills up trailers. So sometimes they'll either have 1 to 2 trailers a week. So right now we're relying on a third-party carrier to help us pick up all those donations and bring them back to the warehouse. Other ones that we do are special pickups. So a lot of times we'll get an email, this location has a special donation for us. So a lot of times it'll either be fresh produce or if it's just dry goods, but we'll get those in emails and then have to fit them in to see where we can pick them up at. The other ones are for like Harvest for Hunger. So usually after that, as long as they're, a lot of places end up having multiple boxes that is over 500 pounds, which is usually what we kind of go off of to make it cost efficient of picking it up with one of our trucks, is at least being over 500 pounds. So we'll go and pick up those boxes and bring them back here. A few of the other ones that we might do, like I know we have coming up this month, we'll be dropping bins off at the IX Center for the auto show and for those pickups and bringing it back. We do a couple special ones I know at the mall that they do when they have the canned food drive. So we drop off bins and then pick up all their donations of cans at the end of the event. So there are a couple different pickup and events. A lot of it is just last minute, hey, they've got produce. Can we figure out a way to go pick it up? And we try to make that work, whether it's that day or most likely the following day, that we can try and set that up to bring the product back here.
Yeah. Well, because obviously, we want to give food to people. And so, it's really great that we have, kind of a regular pickups and then we, experimenting with the direct drop now, I think for about 2 years now, where, we're able to pick up the food from the retailer and give it directly to an agency. But, I would imagine in terms of, again, like going back to kind of the logistics and the routing is, you have to be able to do this when there's space on the truck. So you have to get your timing right for when you're able to pick things up, when they will let you pick things up, when there's room on the truck, and the truck is nearby at the right time.
Correct.
So it's like, that's just another layer of all the back end work that you are managing to
Right.
make kind of the circle go around.
Yes, the planning, there's a lot of bits and pieces that you have to put together just to make sure that it all goes smoothly. So a lot of times we'll have them deliver somewhere and they'll have a full truck. And then as they are getting rid of pallets at agencies, then they'll have more room on the truck for pickups.
Okay. Yeah. And it makes sense, but it's still, it's a lot to say like, oh, we have 20 trucks and 20 drivers. But when you're talking about the number of both donation partners and kind of our distribution partners, there's a mismatch between the number of people and trucks we have and the number of folks that we work with. In
and even the location as well, based on where that agency might be located at. There might be a couple different options that we have around there, depending on if it's a Giant Eagle or a Sam's or Walmart, but some of them are too small and like they can't accept everything that comes from Sam's or BJ's or Costco because it's just too much for them. So a lot of times you have to try to find what might work of how much that they're usually donating to us. And then will that work for the pantry? So there's we have a great team that tries to work with our agencies and our donors and trying to pair them up along with what's on our route and what's in that area. That way we can pick up and deliver to them to make it work.
Yeah. Well, and I love talking about this because I will give a plug. In April, we'll be talking with Maggie and Aaron on our direct drop team to hear all of the details of how they make this amazing, I think, essentially it's like trying to eliminate food waste. We'll be talking with them in April. So we'll get all the details on how this works from their perspective, trying to be matchmakers between our generous donors and our amazing partners who are out there serving our community.
And I don't mean to ruin the surprise or not. I know that they're trying to work with more agencies to see if they can pick up as well, which that helps agencies, and then that would also help us eliminate maybe a pickup once a week. That way it gives us more opportunity to deliver to new agencies that are trying to get food. So they are constantly working. And again, I work with those two all the time. So they're great to work with. And then working with usually the kitchen or the kids programming or seniors, like in agency services. I'm always in the middle and in constant contact with all of them throughout the day. So you definitely have to be good at communicating and deal with all different types of communication, whether it's on the phone, the email, a text. It goes a couple different ways.
I'm sure you're definitely kind of the spoke of the wheel is all that goes through your team.
Kind of like a ping pong ball. It just goes back and forth like.
But I mean that's what we're here to do, is to make all the pieces come together.
Right.
I think I almost lost track of. Oh, I remember. Sorry. There are so many things that I want to talk about, and so I'm trying to keep my focus here. I know you were talking about, trying to, get more agencies on board. I know we've had other conversations with the program folks there's a lot of demand for food from individuals, a lot of, agencies and partners who want to get involved with us, and capacity is always is normally a big roadblock. And from, your team's perspective, as I hope, most folks know, we've moved to our new facility on Coit Road, our new partner distribution hub. And a lot of, the big changes has been on the warehouse and operational side to make it larger and more efficient. So again, another way to tempt people to come visit us for a tour and to volunteer and see our awesome new facility in action. I'd love for you to share a little bit about some of the improvements that our new building, has had for your team to help make, your jobs easier, so you can, be more effective. We can build our capacity and serve more folks here in our community.
Well, from the driver's perspective, having more dock doors is definitely one of the pluses from being here. Before, it was hard getting all of our trucks plus the receiving team when they were having trucks delivering. And that was, we all had to share doors. So we only had so many on the dock space, which was about like 5 or 6 there. And then we had 2 on the cold dock. Now we've kind of moved from, we have about 12 on the dry side. And then we went up to 14, I think, on the cold dock. So there's definitely more room. It makes it easier for drivers. They can load up on the dry side. And then if anything, they can move their truck over to the cold side and then get their cold product. That way they're not traveling back and forth on the inside of the warehouse. Some drivers do, but that definitely helps having extra dock space in the morning, because that is usually when we are the most busy, is in the morning. Everyone is always requesting morning deliveries, and unfortunately we just can't deliver everything in the morning. So the more we can get agencies to kind of space it out a little bit or wait a little bit into the afternoon would kind of help, just so that way we can make sure that we get more agency deliveries. But that has been a huge improvement, is having more dock space for them.
Yeah. Well, so I just I want to just, go back again to the numbers again. It's so hard to just talk about numbers, but, going from, 5 or 6, regular dry docks, so that's going to be like shelf stable, product, to 12. So that's doubled, but on the cold side, so your fresh, your perishable frozen product, from 2 to 14 docks. So that's probably, a game changer in terms of what your drivers are able to accomplish. I can't imagine trying to move the amount of perishable food that we move through 2 doors.
Right. It was a lot of traffic inside. And then even on the outside, we have more space in the parking lot now, like by where all the docks are. So it makes it a little bit easier for drivers to get around. There's spots where they can actually park their trucks and have enough room for over the road drivers coming in, and that way they can back in, and it still wouldn't interfere with our drivers backing in and getting loaded into their docks. And it also gives receiving an opportunity to have extra doors and get their product in. So that way they're not like holding up any of us, and we're not holding up them.
Yeah. Well, and that's a good point to make, is, we've been obviously talking about, most of the product going out, but, we receive also a lot of donations, whether it's, federally funded food, state food, or large corporate food. So that has to get into our facility also. And
for drivers unloading from retail locations. Yes.
Yeah. So, that extra space, being able to save, even if it's, 15, 30 minutes, an hour on all of those, that adds up to time that we can then devote to serving additional partners. And it's small, but it really can make a huge difference. And also, it helps to have fewer headaches, if the folks who are, we're receiving product from, if it's less of a headache for them to work with us, it helps. We depend on all these relationships to make our work.
Right. And it gives a little bit more space too for even those in the warehouse to be able to move and do their jobs properly, because they have more room on the dock to stage the product. And then when they're building the product, it's not product everywhere, where we were definitely running out of space at the old building.
Yeah.
So we would have product lined up down the aisles, and we would try to preload trucks just so that way we had enough room for all of the product. So being able to have a little extra space here has definitely helped, I think, on multiple levels.
Yeah. I'm sure, everywhere having more space is good, and being more thoughtful about how the space is arranged. We've only been here for a couple of months, so I'm sure as we kind of grow into the space, we'll come up with even more ways to use it in the best way possible.
Right.
Yeah. So I'm going to get to a couple other questions, but I did have a question from our audience who would love to hear about how we keep cold food cold, and how we deal with that, especially during the summer. And we talked about winter weather and the challenges of that. But what about in that beautiful July and August weather that seems very far away from now, how we deal with all of that.
Well, all of our box trucks are refrigerated, so they have reefer units on them that they can set and control the temperature on. So they'll usually, based on what you're loading, is what you'll end up changing the temperature to. It even helps in the cold weather, because sometimes when it's so cold, you might have to set the temperature so that way the product doesn't freeze. So it kind of goes both ways. So it's a little bit different. A lot of times you don't want product to freeze, but then you also don't want product to go bad. Everything's usually local, so it's a little bit easier when you have that dry, frozen, cooler product. It's a little bit easier of getting it to the location and making sure that it's still in temp. Some of it that makes it a little bit harder is in that the hot weather. A lot of times, even with if you don't have the kitchen truck, or if you have multiple stops, every time that they're lifting up the door and down, it definitely changes the temperature. So you have to be quick and efficient kind of when you're opening it up, getting your product off, trying to shut it so that way you can't draw.
Yeah, the temperature doesn't start going down.
Yeah, so a lot of times you have to really make sure that they're shutting the door, even if they're loading here. I know it's a little bit easier if they're on the cold dock, it makes it easier because you can keep your door open. But if you're trying to load on the dry dock, a lot of times you would just end up pulling the door down until you come back with your next pallet in order to put it on. You would also put the frozen on last, just to make sure, like usually you load up the dry product first, so that way you're getting that product at the end and getting that off. So there's a couple different things that we make sure to keep our temps in the proper range.
Yeah. Well, and again, that's another piece of the puzzle of how things get loaded, and that logistical piece of, it's like, so you've got the number of pallets that can fit, the weight of the pallets that can be put on the truck, the order that you put it in for the route, and the temperature.
Yeah, and each location, the drivers, they do record what their temps are. Yeah. So they are constantly monitoring that. And if they see like their temp is going up, a lot of times they'll just sit there with the door shut and then let the temperature cool down again. And then they'll continue or open it back up. So they do monitor it throughout all their deliveries.
And, we definitely talk, when we interact with, the folks on the warehouse, and the kitchen, food safety being such a priority. And that, again, like, just as you said, falls all the way through to getting that to our partners.
Right. And some of them, like especially the kids programs, they temp everything. So do some of our seniors. So they're definitely watching that. And then a lot of them, it depends on what type of product that they're doing, especially in the summer. For mobile pantries, we deliver at a lot of the public libraries. They won't really take anything that includes like milk or dairy for those reasons. Because they don't have a place to keep them cold. So they wouldn't be part of their order.
And that makes sense. Something that we've talked about in the past on our Food for Thoughts are some of our agency capacity grants that we do. Because as you mentioned, there's a limit to what a lot of our agencies can hold. Sometimes with just regular food products, but especially cold and frozen food. So trying to get sites the proper equipment they need so that they can serve that food that our clients and neighbors really like, perishable foods, meats and dairies and all of that, we also try on that end again to build up that capacity to get out the types of food that people really, really need. So at every stage, we are following, as much as we can, to meet the need, not just in terms of, it's not about volume. It is about, meeting the need of people, but it's meeting that with the fresh, healthy, nutritious food that requires, being so careful with our trucks and being so careful with how things are packaged. I just love that no one on our team loses sight of making sure that the food that we give to our clients is good food and served just right for them.
Right. And sometimes that makes it more difficult too with the equipment. So a lot of times, again, if something's going on with their truck, we work with Penske, and that's where we end up taking our trucks to get service. So they do TMs on it. So that way routines, just making sure that it's checked out. If they are having an issue, a lot of times the drivers will stop over at the end of the day just to make sure, or if we have to leave it there. Some of the hardships I know last summer, or kind of like with COVID, was just getting extra trucks that if one of our trucks were down, because a lot of times cold makes things go wrong on trucks all the time. So we've had to drop a lot of ours off and try and wait for a rental, or we'd be a little bit tight on our trucks. So that was a little bit of a pinch, but we were still able to deliver and figured out ways to make sure that we were still delivering. And so it's getting a little bit easier now, at least finding parts for trucks and getting rentals. So that was one of our challenges as well.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure, lessons learned, but hopefully things that we won't have to put into practice too often in the future.
You never want to hear anything wrong with the truck.
No. Well, and it's a pretty astonishing operation that we're able to do. It seems like it's simple, picking stuff up, dropping it off, but I think as you've explained, there are just so many nuances with our programs, our partners, and the different needs that our clients and neighbors have. I love that we're able to do it, and I think that the way that your team helps each other out, helps our agencies out, helps the volunteers out, it's just it just really speaks to how much everyone cares about our mission. We are almost out of time, so just to let people know again, if you do have questions after this is over, please reach out to me. We would love to be in touch with you in the future. I just want to let people know on March 8th, we are going to be speaking with Tiff Scruggs, our VP of Client Services. As you might have heard in the news, there's going to be some big changes to the SNAP program with emergency allotments ending. So a lot of folks are going to be seeing the amount of money they're able to get to purchase food on their own is going to be significantly slashed starting next month. So we're going to hear about this really important situation and what folks can do to help our neighbors who are really going to be seeing some significant changes to what they are able to get through the SNAP program. So again, that's going to be on March 8th. You're always welcome to reach out with questions, to come visit us for a tour, and especially to volunteer. You can check out our website to learn more about that. But just as we're wrapping up, Brittany, anything else that you'd like to share about your time at the food bank, favorite things about working here, just to I'll give you the last word here.
Well, since I've been here, it definitely is more like a family. Everyone does come together to help you no matter what. And it's been amazing just to be able to help somebody and know that you're going home at the end of the day, helping someone else. So it's been a great 2 years so far. And it's been nice to at least enjoy weekends and holidays off as well, and special events that, I never really got to enjoy anywhere else. And they definitely try to help make arrangements to make sure me and even our drivers get to help in are included in, because a lot of times drivers don't get included in a lot of things because they're always out on the road and they're never back here. So that's been one nice thing being here.
Awesome. And I love that. And that's why I'm so excited that you were able to join us here today. I love getting to learn about how your department works. And I'm so grateful that you decided to share a little bit with us today. And I will wrap up here, but thank you so much for joining us. Thanks to everyone who has joined us on the talk here today. We really appreciate how much you support the food bank, your generosity, your time, and I hope that you will reach out, come visit us, come volunteer, and hope to see you in March and April to hear about SNAP and our direct drop program. But thanks, Brittany, so much. I hope everyone has.
Thanks, everyone. See ya.